She left food by the bench every night. One day the homeless man left a note that shook her. Every evening at exactly 7:30 p.m. Sarah Chen would walk past the small park on Maple Street on her way home from her job at the downtown law firm. For 3 months, she had noticed the same homeless man sitting on the weathered wooden bench near the fountain, always in the same position with his worn backpack beside him and a tattered blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Sarah was a 28-year-old immigration attorney who had built her career on helping families navigate the complex legal system. Despite her demanding schedule and the emotional weight of her cases, she had always made time for small acts of kindness. But something about this particular man tugged at her heart in a way she couldn't explain. He appeared to be in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to hold depths of sadness. Unlike many homeless individuals she encountered, he never asked for money or food. He simply sat quietly, sometimes reading a book, sometimes just watching the world go by, with a dignity that remained intact despite his circumstances. One rainy Tuesday evening, Sarah made an impulsive decision that would change both their lives. Instead of walking straight home, she stopped at the small deli near her office and bought a sandwich, a cup of soup, and a bottle of water. Her heart pounded with nervousness as she approached the bench where the man sat huddled under his blanket, trying to stay dry. "Excuse me," Sarah said softly, not wanting to startle him. "I thought you might be hungry. I hope you don't mind." The man looked up at her with surprise and something that might have been tears in his eyes. "That's very kind of you, Miss. Thank you." His voice was cultured and gentle, with the remnants of what sounded like an educated accent. Sarah was struck by his politeness and the way he accepted her offering with such grace and gratitude. "I'm Sarah," she said, setting the food down on the bench beside him. "I'm William," he replied with a slight nod that seemed almost formal. "William Harrison. And thank you again. This is more kindness than I've seen in quite some time." Sarah walked home that night thinking about William's reaction to her simple gesture. There had been something in his eyes, not just gratitude, but a kind of surprised recognition that someone had seen him as a human being worthy of kindness, rather than just another homeless person to be ignored or avoided. The next evening, Sarah found herself stopping at the deli again. This time she bought a hearty meal, a hot sandwich, soup, fruit, and a thermos of coffee. When she reached the bench, William was there as usual, and his face lit up when he saw her approaching. "Sarah," he said, and she was touched that he had remembered her name. "You don't need to do this, you know, but I can't tell you how much it means to me." "I want to," Sarah replied simply. Everyone deserves a good meal. This became their routine. Every evening, Sarah would stop at the deli and bring William dinner. They would chat briefly about the weather, about the books he was reading, about small observations about life. In the city, Sarah learned that William was well-read and intelligent, with insights that suggested a background very different from his current circumstances. But William never shared details about his past or how he had ended up homeless. Sarah respected his privacy, understanding that everyone had their own story and their own reasons for keeping certain parts of it private. As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself looking forward to her evening visits with William more than she had expected. Their brief conversations had become a highlight of her day, a moment of genuine human connection in a life that was often consumed by legal briefs and court deadlines. William, for his part, seemed to blossom under Sarah's consistent kindness. He began to smile more, to share small observations about the books he was reading or the people he watched in the park during the day. Sarah could see that her visits meant more to him than just the food. They represented acknowledgement, dignity, and the simple human need to be seen and valued. One evening in November, as the weather grew colder, Sarah arrived at the bench to find William shivering despite his layers of clothing. The temperature had dropped unexpectedly, and his thin blanket was clearly inadequate protection against the autumn chill. "William, you're freezing," Sarah said with concern. "Don't you have anywhere warmer to stay?" William shook his head, trying to minimize his discomfort. "The shelters fill up quickly, and honestly, they're not always safe places for someone my age. I manage well enough here." Sarah felt her heart clench with worry. "This isn't sustainable. You could get hypothermia." "I've survived worse," William said quietly, but Sarah could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the toll that months of outdoor living had taken on his aging body. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about William sitting on that bench in the cold, trying to stay warm with inadequate clothing and shelter. The next day, she went shopping during her lunch break, buying a heavy winter coat, warm gloves, a thick blanket, and a sleeping bag rated for cold weather. When she arrived at the bench that evening with both dinner and the winter supplies, William's reaction was overwhelming. He stared at the items in disbelief, then looked up at Sarah with tears streaming down his face. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "No one has shown me this kind of generosity in longer than I can remember." "You don't need to say anything," Sarah replied, helping him try on the coat. "Just stay warm." As William wrapped himself in the new blanket and pulled on the warm gloves, Sarah noticed something she hadn't seen before, a small notebook that had fallen from his backpack. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, and she caught a glimpse of what looked like poetry or journal entries. "You write?" she asked gently. But William quickly retrieved the notebook, looking embarrassed. Just thoughts, observations, nothing important. But Sarah had seen enough to recognize that William's writing, like his speech, suggested an education and intelligence that his circumstances might have hidden from casual observers. Over the following weeks, as winter settled over the city, Sarah continued her evening visits. She had upgraded from simple meals to more substantial dinners, often including homemade soup that she prepared on weekends. William's health and spirits seemed to improve with the better nutrition and warmer clothing. One evening, William surprised Sarah by sharing a small piece of his story. "I used to be a teacher," he said quietly as they sat together on the bench. "High school English. I loved those kids. Loved helping them discover the power of words and stories." "What happened?" Sarah asked gently, sensing that this revelation was significant. William was quiet for a long moment. "Life happened. Bad decisions, worse luck, and a series of events that led me here. But I don't want to burden you with the details." Sarah respected his privacy, but she filed away this new information about William's background. It explained his articulate speech, his love of reading, and the notebook full of writing that he carried with him. As December approached, Sarah began to worry about William's ability to survive the harsh winter months. Despite the supplies she had provided, sleeping outdoors in freezing temperatures was dangerous for anyone, especially someone of William's age. The first major snowstorm of winter hit the city on a Thursday night in early December. Sarah had been checking the weather forecast obsessively, worried about William's safety during the severe cold snap that meteorologists were predicting. When she arrived at the park that evening, she found William huddled on the bench, barely visible under the snow that had already begun to accumulate. "William, you can't stay out here tonight," Sarah said urgently. "The temperature is supposed to drop to 10 degrees below zero. You could die." William looked up at her with exhausted eyes. "The shelters are all full. I called around this afternoon. There's nowhere else to go." Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself. "Come home with me, just for tonight, until the storm passes." William stared at her in shock. "Sarah, I can't. You don't know me, not really. I could be dangerous." "You're not dangerous," Sarah said firmly. "You're a former teacher who loves books and writes poetry. You're kind and grateful and dignified. You're also a human being who deserves not to freeze to death on a park bench." After much persuasion, William reluctantly agreed to spend the night in Sarah's apartment. As they walked through the snowy streets, Sarah could see how difficult this was for him. Accepting help beyond a meal felt like crossing a line that challenged his sense of independence and pride. Sarah's apartment was modest but warm and comfortable. She set William up on the couch with extra blankets and pillows, and insisted that he take a hot shower while she prepared a proper dinner. When William emerged from the bathroom, clean and wearing some of her father's clothes that she kept for his visits, the transformation was remarkable. "You look like a different person," Sarah observed. "I feel like a different person," William replied quietly. "I had forgotten what it felt like to be truly warm and clean." Over dinner, William began to open up more about his past. He had indeed been a high school English teacher for 30 years, beloved by his students and respected by his colleagues. He had never married, dedicating his life to education and literature. But a series of financial mistakes, combined with a gambling addiction that he had hidden for years, had gradually destroyed his life. "I lost my house first," William explained, his voice heavy with shame. "Then my job when the school board found out about my debts. I was too proud to ask for help, too ashamed to let anyone know how bad things had gotten. By the time I realized I needed help, it was too late." Sarah listened without judgment, understanding now why William had been so reluctant to share his story. The fall from respected educator to homeless man was a source of deep shame for him, a reminder of how quickly life could unravel when addiction and poor choices compounded. "How long have you been on the streets?" Sarah asked gently. 8 months, William replied, "the longest 8 months of my life." That night, as William slept safely on her couch, Sarah lay awake thinking about the complexities of homelessness and the individual stories behind each person she passed on the street. William's intelligence, education, and fundamental decency hadn't protected him from the circumstances that led to his current situation. The next morning, Sarah woke to find William already awake, sitting at her kitchen table with his notebook, writing. He looked up when she entered the room, and she could see that he had been crying. "I wrote something for you," he said quietly, tearing a page from his notebook, "to thank you for everything you've done for me." Sarah took the note with trembling hands, not knowing that what she was about to read would change her understanding of kindness, humanity, and the power of simple human connection forever. Sarah unfolded the handwritten note, and as she read William's words, tears began streaming down her face. The note was written in beautiful, flowing script that spoke of years of practice and education. "Dear Sarah, for 8 months, I have been invisible. People looked through me, around me, past me, but never at me. I had begun to believe that I was disappearing, that I was becoming less than human. Just another piece of urban debris to be stepped around and ignored. But you saw me. Not just my circumstances, not just my need, but me. William Harrison, former teacher, lover of books, writer, of small thoughts and observations. You saw the person I used to be and the person I still am, underneath the layers of loss and shame. Your kindness has been more than food for my body. It has been food for my soul. Every evening when you stopped at that bench, you reminded me that I still matter, that I still have value as a human being. You gave me back my dignity when I thought it was lost forever. I need you to know that you saved my life, not just from hunger or cold, though you did that too. You saved me from disappearing entirely, from giving up on the possibility that life could ever be good again. I have been writing in this notebook for months, documenting my thoughts and observations from the streets. But tonight, in the warmth and safety of your home, I realized that I have been writing the wrong story. I have been writing about loss and despair, when I should have been writing about hope and human kindness. You are the best of humanity, Sarah. You are proof that compassion still exists in this world, that people can still see beyond circumstances to the human heart beneath. I will never forget what you have done for me, and I will spend whatever time I have left trying to be worthy of the kindness you have shown me, with all my gratitude and respect. William. Sarah read the note 3 times, each reading bringing fresh tears. She had thought she was simply providing meals to a hungry man, but William's words revealed that her actions had meant so much more. She had given him something that was perhaps even more important than food, recognition of his humanity and worth. When she looked up, William was watching her with anxious eyes. I hope I haven't overstepped, he said quietly. I just needed you to understand what your kindness has meant to me. William, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever written to me. But I need you to understand something. You didn't need to earn my kindness. You deserved it simply because you're a human being. William nodded, but Sarah could see that he was still struggling with feelings of unworthiness that months of homelessness had ingrained in him. I want to help you get back on your feet, Sarah said suddenly. Not just with food and shelter, but with everything. Getting your life back? William looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. Sarah, you've already done so much. I can't ask you to do more. You're not asking, I'm offering. And I have some ideas about how we can start. Sarah had been thinking about William's situation since learning about his background as a teacher. She knew that getting back into education would require addressing his financial problems, rebuilding his credit, and finding stable housing. But she also knew that William's skills and experience were valuable, and that there were programs designed to help people in his situation. First, Sarah said, we need to get you into transitional housing. I know some people who work with homeless services, and I can help you navigate the system. Then we need to look at your debts and see what can be resolved or forgiven. William listened with growing amazement as Sarah outlined a comprehensive plan for helping him rebuild his life. She had clearly been thinking about this for some time, researching options and possibilities. But why? William asked finally. Why would you do all this for someone you barely know? Sarah thought about her answer carefully. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Because your past doesn't define your future. And because I believe that helping others is what makes us human. She paused, then added, and because you've given me something too, William. You've reminded me why I became a lawyer, to help people who need advocates, who need someone to believe in them when they can't believe in themselves. Over the next several weeks, Sarah threw herself into helping William navigate the complex systems designed to assist homeless individuals. She used her legal skills to help him address his outstanding debts, her professional connections to find him temporary housing, and her personal time to accompany him to appointments and meetings. The process was more complicated than either of them had anticipated. William's gambling debts had damaged his credit severely, and his lack of recent employment history made him a challenging candidate for many assistance programs. But Sarah's persistence and legal expertise gradually began to open doors. I don't understand why you're doing all this, the caseworker at the housing assistance office said to Sarah during one of their appointments. Are you related to Mr. Harrison? No, Sarah replied simply. I'm his friend. The caseworker looked skeptical, clearly unused to seeing such dedication from someone who wasn't family. But Sarah's professional credentials and obvious commitment to William's case eventually convinced the various agencies to take his situation seriously. William, meanwhile, was struggling with the emotional aspects of rebuilding his life. Months of homelessness had damaged his self-confidence and sense of worth, and he found it difficult to believe that he could ever return to his former life as an educator. I keep waiting for you to realize that I'm not worth all this effort, William confided to Sarah one evening as they reviewed paperwork for his housing application. I'm a failed teacher who lost everything because of my own poor choices. You're a human being who made mistakes and faced consequences, Sarah corrected gently. That doesn't make you worthless, it makes you human. She had been researching opportunities for William to return to education, and had discovered several programs that helped formerly homeless individuals transition back into the workforce. One program, specifically designed for educators who had experienced career interruptions, seemed particularly promising. William, I want you to look at this, Sarah said, showing him information about the program. They provide support for teachers who want to return to the classroom after extended absences. They help with certification updates, provide mentoring, and even offer placement assistance. William read through the materials with growing interest. Do you really think they would consider someone with my background? I think they would be lucky to have someone with your experience and perspective, Sarah replied firmly. The application process for the program was extensive, requiring essays about William's teaching philosophy, his goals for returning to education, and his experiences during his time away from the classroom. Sarah helped him prepare his application, but the words were entirely his own. In his personal statement, William wrote about how his experience with homelessness had deepened his understanding of his students' challenges, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. He described how living on the margins of society had given him insights into resilience, dignity, and the importance of seeing every person's potential regardless of their circumstances. My time on the streets taught me that everyone has a story worth hearing and value worth recognizing, William wrote. These lessons will make me a better teacher, more compassionate and understanding of the struggles my students face outside the classroom. When William was accepted into the program, both he and Sarah cried tears of joy and relief. It felt like a validation not just of William's potential, but of the belief that people could overcome even the most difficult circumstances with the right support and opportunities. The program provided William with temporary housing in a residence for participants, updated training in current educational methods, and most importantly, a community of other educators who were rebuilding their careers. For the first time in months, William was surrounded by people who understood his passion for teaching and his commitment to helping young people learn and grow. I feel like myself again, William told Sarah during one of their regular dinners together. Not the person I was before everything fell apart, but a better version of that person, someone who understands struggle and resilience in ways I never did before. Sarah watched William's transformation with pride and amazement. The broken man she had first met on the park bench was becoming a confident, purposeful educator again. But more than that, he was becoming an advocate for others who had experienced homelessness. Using his story to challenge stereotypes and promote understanding. You know, Sarah said, I think your students are going to be very lucky to have you as their teacher. William smiled, the same gentle smile she had first seen on that park bench, but now filled with hope and purpose instead of resignation and despair. 6 months later, William Harrison stood in front of his own classroom for the first time in over a year. Roosevelt High School had hired him as a full-time English teacher, impressed by his credentials, his passion for education, and his unique perspective on overcoming adversity. The classroom walls were decorated with inspirational quotes and student work, and William felt a sense of coming home that he had thought he might never experience again. Sarah attended William's first day of school. Sitting in the back of the classroom as he introduced himself to his students, she watched with pride as he commanded the room with quiet authority, engaging the teenagers with stories and questions that immediately captured their attention. My name is Mr. Harrison, William began, and I want to start by telling you that everyone in this room has value, everyone has potential, and everyone has a story worth hearing. Over the course of this year, we're going to explore the power of words and stories, both the ones we read and the ones we write ourselves. One student raised her hand. Mr. Harrison, where did you teach before this? William paused, and Sarah could see him making a decision about how much of his story to share. I taught for 30 years before taking some time away from education. During that time, I learned some important lessons about resilience, about the kindness of strangers, and about the power of second chances. Those lessons are going to make me a better teacher for all of you. After class, William and Sarah walked through the school hallways together, both of them marveling at how much had changed since that first snowy night when Sarah had brought William home from the park bench. I have something for you, William said, pulling a small wrapped package from his briefcase. I know it's not much, but I wanted you to have this. Sarah unwrapped the package to find a leather-bound journal. Beautiful and inside the front cover, William had written an inscription for Sarah, who saw me when I was invisible, who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and who reminded me that kindness can change the world. May you fill these pages with your own stories of compassion and hope, with eternal gratitude. William. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. William, this is beautiful. But you didn't need to give me anything. Yes, I did, William replied firmly. You gave me back my life, my purpose, my sense of worth. This journal is just a small token of my gratitude. William had indeed transformed his experience into a force for good. He had started a program at the school for students experiencing homelessness, providing them with support, resources, and most importantly, someone who understood their struggles. He also volunteered at the local homeless shelter, offering literacy classes and job interview preparation. I realized that my experience wasn't just something that happened to me, William explained to Sarah. It was something I could use too, help others to bridge the gap between those who have homes and those who don't. Sarah had been equally transformed by her relationship with William. She had started volunteering with legal aid organizations that provided services to homeless individuals. Using her skills to help people navigate the complex systems that William had struggled with, She had also become an advocate for policy changes that would make it easier for people to transition out of homelessness. You know what I learned from all this? Sarah said as they sat together in William's classroom after the students had left. I learned that the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impact. I thought I was just giving you dinner, but you taught me about dignity, resilience, and the power of seeing people for who they really are. William nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. And you taught me that there are still good people in the world, people who will help a stranger without expecting anything in return. Their friendship had become one of the most important relationships in both their lives. They had dinner together every Sunday, sharing stories about their work and their lives, continuing the conversation that had started on a park bench months earlier. I still have that note you wrote me, Sarah said, the one about being invisible. I read it sometimes when I need to remember why kindness matters. And I still think about that first night you brought me dinner, William replied. How you saw past my circumstances to the person underneath. That moment changed everything for me. As they prepared to leave the school, William turned to Sarah with a serious expression. I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to pay forward what you did for me. Not just to you, but to anyone who needs help, anyone who feels invisible, anyone who has lost hope. You already are, Sarah said, gesturing around the classroom where William was making a difference in young people's lives every day. Every student you teach, every person you help at the shelter, every time you share your story, you're paying it forward. Their story reminds us that everyone we pass on the street has a history, a story, an inherent worth that circumstances cannot diminish. It shows us that simple acts of kindness can literally save lives and transform futures. And that sometimes the people who appear to have the least to offer are actually the ones with the most to teach us about resilience, dignity, and hope. Most importantly, it proves that seeing someone, really seeing them as a human being worthy of respect and kindness, can be the most powerful gift we can give. And that sometimes the most profound changes in the world begin with one person deciding to care about another. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of compassion and human connection, please subscribe to our channel. We share stories of hope, transformation, and the incredible ways that ordinary acts of kindness can change lives forever. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe that everyone matters, everyone has value, and that sometimes the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference in the world.